I remember this just vaguely. Since I was little at the time, maybe 7 in my old house, my room had its own floor. It wasn't even supposed to be a bedroom. It was more of an attachment to the attic, or a closet-type room the people that owned. The house before us used it as a playroom for their daughters. My room also had a huge closet door that was attached to the attic. The closet was elevated up, so that you would have to climb a set of wooden stairs to get into it. It had a big sliding door, and it was completely packed with toys and other junk from my childhood. Since I was little at the time, I always got scared of being so separated from the rest of my family and having that huge closet in my room. Then, there was this one night. I was laying in bed afraid, after watching a scary movie with my family. Then I heard the sound of a toy all over up in the closet. I jumped out of my bed and ran to my parents' room. They told me there was no one in my closet. They saw how afraid I was, so they let me sleep in their room that night. The next night, I had kind of forgotten about it, until I heard it again. The sound of a container of Legos spilling out everywhere up in the closet. Again, I ran to my parents' room and told them about it. My dad was starting to grow impatient with me. He reluctantly agreed to let me sleep in their room again the next day. Me and my mom checked the closet, and there it was. A pile of Legos lay on the floor. Spilled out of the container, I thought, this was proof that somebody was in my closet. But my mom assured me that it simply fell over. That night, my dad locked his door. He said he was tired of my nonsense. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there completely silent, with my young boy, imagination, running, waiting for another sound to come from the closet. It was probably about an hour before it happened. It broke the silence, the sound of the closet door rolling open with force. The moonlight shining through my window illuminated the figure. Standing by my closet door, I let out the most horrific, ear-piercing scream you've ever heard. As pure terror swept over my body, a feeling that I still remember today. The figure jumped down from the closet and ran out of my room and out the front door of my house. My mom ran up to my room in shock, as my dad ran downstairs trying to catch whoever it was. But he never did. The police never caught the man. When I was in 8th grade, I went on a school trip that was called the Louisiana Tour. It was mostly going around to significant sites in South Louisiana. One of the places we went to was Myrtle's Plantation, which is considered to be one of the most haunted places in the country. There are all kinds of stories about the place, but at one point we were standing in a room as a part of a larger group, and the tour guide was talking about something, I don't remember what. As I'm standing there, I start to hear what sounds like someone hitting a piano key after I heard it a couple times. I started to look around for the source of the sound. I didn't see a piano, but I kept hearing it. So I asked my friends who were standing near me if they heard it. They said no. When I heard it again, I said, "There it is. Again." They must have heard it. They thought I was crazy, so I went back to looking around the room. Everyone's eyes were on the tour guide, except for one woman. She caught my eye and pointed at me, and then at her ear with a questioning look. I realized she was asking if I heard it too, and I nodded at this point. The tour guide starts telling a story about a soldier who had died there, and that he played the piano, and multiple guests had reported hearing him playing in the night. I honestly didn't know what to think. I guess I still don't. I talked to the woman as we were all leaving the room, and she said she heard the exact same thing as me, but her husband and son had not heard it. It was near Halloween time when my friends and I were telling ghost stories. My friend said she was going to tell a story about her parents' first date. She said she didn't like telling the story since it was actually true, but we prodded her on to cut to the chase. The parents had a nice, if awkward, first date, and around the time that they would have said good night. The male in the situation, who's my friend's dad, suggested that they go for a midnight hike up Provo Canyon. He apparently knew the place since he had done a fair amount of rock climbing in the area. So the two drove up the mouth of the canyon, got out of their cars, and started hiking under just the light of the stars, since it was a new moon. At some point, the man starts getting a bad feeling since the pathway ahead, which would pass under some trees, would be dark. And because it was getting quite late, he ignores the feeling and presses on. A minute later, the feeling came back to the man. He ignored it again and started walking a bit of the way into the trees when his foot hit something soft. In the middle of the path, under the trees, it was too dark to see just what this soft thing was, and the feeling came back stronger than ever. Instead of finding out what his foot had bumped into, he and the woman both agreed to hightail it. Out of there, years later, after being married for some time, they were watching an interview with a serial killer, Ted Bundy, in response to a question asking him to describe the time that he felt the closest to being caught. He explained about the night that he lured a girl into Provo Canyon and had just killed her. When he heard some people coming up the trail, he explained how he hid in the trees just in time, only to watch some guy walk right into the body and for some reason just turn around and walk away. My school's library is open until 2 in the morning for the idiots, like me, that don't do their essays. Until the last minute. It's a pretty small building, and most of the books are in the basement area called the stacks. Just to give you a quick layout, there's the big main stairs that go down to the stacks, a vending machine room, and the long hallway with the 4 entrances into the stacks. The stacks are 2 really big rooms on opposite sides of the hallway, with a huge amount of bookshelves and study desks in the walls. I was there around 11:40 p.m. last year. It was a pretty research-intensive essay, so I was down in the stacks working in one of the study desks, so I didn't have to keep going upstairs and downstairs again. I had been there for maybe 2 hours, and everyone, except for a boy, working a few desks down from me, had already left. I was pretty zoned out by this point. It was an 8A amateur class, so I didn't have much time until it was due, and I was sort of panicking, so it really pissed me off when I heard someone flipping through book pages really fast to make them do that loud whipping noise at the other end of the room. I sort of ignored it for a while, thinking they'd go away eventually, but they just kept doing it. After about 5 minutes, I got sick of it and started to walk over to tell them to knock it off. I get about 3 steps across the room, and it just stops. I sat back down, and it was quiet again, only for like 10 minutes before the flipping pages noise started again. Only loads louder, like they grabbed a huge book. That time, the boy started to get pissed off too, and he stood up and started walking around. Through the bookshelves, trying to find them, it kept going. So I got up too and started looking around with him. It got really loud, and it was pretty obvious where it was coming from by that point. So we started walking towards it. He was on one side of the shelves, and I was on the other. We walked all the way down the shelves. No one there. We hadn't seen anyone come in the stacks. And we were on the side of the room with the entrances. No way could anyone have come in without us seeing them. The noise stopped again, and we both sort of just slowly walked back to our seats. I assumed it was just a fan or something in the other room, and I really needed to get my essay done. We sat down, and immediately the noises started again. It sounded like it was coming from right next to the guy's chair. He shoved his stuff in his bag, looked at me, said this, and took off. I was out of there. Maybe 5 seconds behind him. I still won't go back in the stacks at night, even when there's other people. Down, music. There this happened. when I still had my fishing boat. It was a horrifying experience that will never leave us. Me and my wife departed from the East Coast for our 2-day fishing trip in the North Atlantic. The first day and night were normal. We got a decent catch at night. We played cards while listening to music. It was enjoyable up until the next night. After a slow day at sea, we were playing cards again inside this night without the music. It was at that moment that we heard the sound of a boat motor. We rushed outside to see a man piloting a crappy old motorboat with absolutely no lights on. He had stopped directly in front of our bow. The man was middle-aged. He had a beard and a baseball cap on. I went up closer and asked him if he needed help. He asked us if we had any spear gasoline. I apologized and told him we didn't. I asked the man if he was low on fuel and if he needed a ride back to the shore, but he declined. He claimed he had plenty of gas, which brought an awkward silence as me and my wife wondered why he asked us for guest. Then the silence started to creep me and my wife out, mostly because of the way he just blankly stared at me. The only reason I could see was because of the deck light in the front of our boat. Other than that, we were surrounded by darkness. The man finally broke the silence and asked us if we had a good catch that day. I told him we didn't, still trying to be polite, even though the situation was odd and creepy. I asked the man how he was getting around in the darkness, but all he gave me was a chuckle, as if I had made a joke. I figured he misheard me. He turned his little motorboat around, and the last thing he said to us was, "Nice meeting you folks." He sailed off into the total blackness surrounding us. Me and my wife were completely weirded out. My wife told me she was afraid he was going to rob us, being a fisher. You run into and make conversation with other sailors and fishers all the time. But I knew something about that guy was off, the fact that he came up to us so late at night, so far from the shore and alone in that little motorboat. And the way he acted, we were both really uncomfortable, so I decided to turn out our lights and sail a bit north just to make sure the guy couldn't find us again. Call me paranoid. Later that night, probably around 2. In the morning, I woke up to the disturbing and ear-piercing scream of my wife. I shot up from my L position to see a man standing at the edge of our bed. I lunged out of the bed towards the man, but he was out of the cabin. Before I could even get out of the room, I heard the sound of the same motorboat starting, before speeding away into the darkness again. We sailed all the way back to the shore that night and reported the man right away. Of course, nothing was ever heard of the topic again. We still have no idea what the man wanted or what he was planning on doing, but it still gives me nightmares. To this day, the way my bedroom was laid out was that across the room from my bed, there's a small alcove that does not receive any light because of the closet that's slightly in front of it. So the closet blocks the ceiling light and the ambient light from outside. When it's dark, I was in 4th year high school and was trying to sleep, but couldn't. You know that feeling like someone's staring at you? I was feeling it. I couldn't shake it. And it just felt like whatever was staring at me had such malicious intent in it. I opened my eyes, and my gaze was drawn to that dark corner of the room where I saw a hazy, darker outline in it. I got goosebumps, but thought that it was nothing there. I'm just imagining things. I closed my eyes again, trying to force myself to get sleep, but I can't shake that evil-feeling stare. Then there was a creak sound, the sound from somebody putting pressure on the floor. I opened my eyes again, and that shadow thing was in the opposite corner. Now all my inner senses went ballistic, and I threw my pillow and blanket over my head as I cried myself to sleep, all while hoping that the thing wouldn't come closer. I know I didn't imagine or dream, and it still sends chills down my spine. To this day, it was the first time my family ever went camping together. I was 18 at the time. We probably wouldn't have gone. If it weren't for my brother and sister, who were still only 11, and happened to be twins, it was mid-July, and I was actually excited to do it. We drove all the way out to the country. We didn't go to a camping site. My dad just parked the car on the side of the quiet road, and we hiked about a mile into the woods until we found a small clearing. In the woods, we pitched our 2 tents, one for me and my siblings, and one for my parents. So, come nighttime, I couldn't sleep at all trying to fall asleep. In that sleeping bag was like trying to fall asleep on the grass. I just couldn't get to sleep. I spun around and tried to make myself comfortable for hours. My little brother and sister had been asleep for a long time at that point. And then I heard the sound of the zipper to the tent zipping down. I looked up and saw someone poking their head into the tent. I couldn't see who it was. "Dad?" I whispered. Whoever it was removed their head from the inside of the tent. "Dad?" I said louder. Whoever it was quickly moved away from the tent, leaving it unzipped. I was so confused. I was sure it was my mom or dad just checking on me. So I crawled out of the tent and walked over to my parents' tent. I unzipped it and crawled inside. My parents were both in their sleeping bags. I shook my dad until he woke up. I asked him if he had just checked on us. He said no. I got chills as he said it. I then woke up, my mom hoping that it was her, but she groggy told me that she hadn't left the tent either. I got goosebumps all over as I came to the realization that somebody actually came up to our tent, opened up the zipper, and peered inside a stranger. For all I know, some sort of psycho. I couldn't even really tell if my parents took me seriously or not. Or maybe I just don't remember. But I do remember that I didn't get a minute of sleep that night. My parents were on their honeymoon to Key West. When they arrived at the hotel to check in, they were told that the room would be non-smoking. With my dad being a smoker, they requested a different room. They got the room switch and went to their room. As they got off the elevator, the smell of fresh paint was overwhelming down the hall. There was a painter with all necessary supplies laid out around him as he was painting the wall as my parents walked past him. They casually greeted him, and the painter had absolutely no acknowledgement of their presence. Whatever, when they got to their room, the smell of paint was even worse in there, so bad. It wasn't even bearable. So they decided to go to the front desk to change rooms when they explained the situation. The attendant looked very confused and informed them that there wasn't a scheduled paint job on that floor for that day, but agreed to change their room. Anyway, my parents go back to their floor to grab their luggage, and the painter's completely gone. All supplies cleaned up and gone within 10 minutes, and the smell of pain was completely gone. At this point, my parents were freaked out, but didn't think much of it, and went to their new room the next morning on their way to breakfast. They overhear a tour guide talking to a group my parents tuned in when the guide mentioned the floor that they were originally supposed to stay on. Apparently a long time ago, there was a painter on that floor painting and fell down the elevator shaft to his death. Now, my parents don't normally believe in the paranormal, but after an event like this, that they had no explanation for it, freaked them out a good bit. This story didn't happen to me. It happened to my cousin, and yet it still freaks me out thinking about it. This story is all too true. My cousin Nicky was on Skype with his girlfriend Sam at around 1 in the morning on a Friday night. She was asking him to come over and stay the night, but he didn't really want to drive over that late. Sometime into the conversation, Nicky noticed the closet door behind Sam open a crack. Nicky pointed it out, and Sammy turned and looked at the closet. They both ended up ignoring it. It was probably another half hour into the conversation that the closet door creaked open even more. Nicky spotted it again and told Sam that her little brother must be hiding in the closet she denied. It and told him the window was open or something, so there must have been a draft. It was about half an hour later that the closet door completely opened and somebody stepped out of the closet and walked out of Sam's bedroom. Sam didn't seem to notice, but Nikki got startled from what he just saw. He told her that her little brother was hiding in her closet, but what she said next scared Nikki shitless. She told him that she was home alone that night. Nikki started yelling at the screen for her to lock her door and call the police, and that he would be over there as fast as he could. Sam just started to understand the situation as she turned and saw the closet door completely open. She ran over to her doorway and let out a blood-curdling scream before slamming the door shut and locking it. Nicky drove over as fast as he could while calling the police when he got there. The front door was left open, so he ran into the house. Into Sam's room, he knocked on the door and told her it was him. But she wouldn't answer when the police finally arrived. They busted open the door to find her curled up in the corner of the room. In shock, she later told the police that she had seen somebody standing face to face with her at the doorway before shutting the door. It was a dark and stormy night. The kind of stormy that I loved. Thunder and lightning roaring. So I was staying up late watching movies. I lived with my dad, but he wasn't home that night. He was working nights anyway. After I finished watching the movie Forrest Gump for the H100th time, I decided 2 a.m. was a good time to get some shut-eye. I loved going to sleep during thunderstorms. It was just enjoyable to listen to, but suddenly I heard the sound of something hitting my window. It wasn't the sound of rain hitting the window, but in such a big storm. I didn't think much of it and put my head back down. But a few seconds later, the same noise. Something hits the window again. This time I made the sound out to be a rock hitting the window. My heart started racing. It couldn't be my dad. In a small village, a cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content and purring in the sun.